Good day, everyone. I am Jane Millen Limon, and I will going to discuss to you about gender concepts. But before we proceed with the lesson proper, we have here learning objectives and learning outcomes. Learning objectives are to define gender concepts and terminologies, to identify the differences between sex and gender, to discuss the differences between sex roles and gender roles, to explore the relationship between gender and power. And the learning outcomes is participants will have a sound understanding of gender concepts and terminologies. So let us define first what is gender. Gender refers to those characteristics and roles of women and men that are socially constructed. Social roles and relations between men and women in the society. Gender affects all parts of our lives: social, economic, and political. Gender also changes over time. Gender also is about how power is used and shared. What is differences between sex and gender? Sex is biological: penis, vagina, ovaries, testes, uterus, and etc. Gender is socially constructed roles, responsibilities, and behaviors. Sex is universal. Factors related to sex are the same around the world. Men have penises and women have vaginas in every country. Gender is cultural. Elements related to gender vary within and between cultures. The roles of men and women in Kenya may be different from the roles of men and women in India. Sex is born with. Gender is learned behavior. Sex is generally unchanging. Change is now possible with surgical intervention.
Okay lang ba yan?
Gender is changes over time. In the past, few women became lawyers or physicians. Today, it is very common to find women in these professions. Sex does not vary. Gender varies within and between cultures. So we go now with the masculinity and femininity across cultures. According to Geert Hofstede, a social psychologist, was one of the first people to define cultures by gender traits. His theory says that cultures can be categorized by gender based on how they stress the balance between individual achievement and social nurturing. Moreover, Hofstede says that people within societies often take on gender roles that are prescribed by whether a society is masculine or feminine. According to Hofstede, a masculine culture or masculine society is one that stresses different expectations for men and women. In a masculine culture, men are expected to be assertive, competitive, and focused on material success. Women are expected to be nurturing and focused on people and quality of life. In contrast, Hofstede says a feminine culture or feminine society is one where gender roles are more fluid. Both men and women are expected to be nurturing and focused on people and quality of life. We go now with the traits of masculinity and femininity. For the social norms of high masculine or masculinity, they have ego-oriented, money and things are important, live in order to work. And for the social norms of low masculine or feminine, relationship-oriented, quality of life and people are important, and work in order to live. And for the politics and economics, for the masculine or high masculine, economic growth high priority, conflict solved through force, and for the politics and economics of feminine, environment protection high priority, conflict solved through negotiation. And for the religion, masculine, it is most important for them in life. Only men can be priests. And for the religion of the feminine, it is less important for them in life, and both men and women as priests. For the masculine work, larger gender wage gap, fewer women in management, preference for high pay, and for the feminine work, smaller gender wage gap, more women in management, preference for fewer working hours. And for the family and school, masculine for them, traditional family structure, girls cry, boys don't, boys fight, girls don't, and failing is a disaster. And for the feminine, flexible family structure, both boys and girls cry, neither fight, and failing is a minor accident. Cultural dimension of masculinity and femininity. According to Hofstede 2011, masculinity, femininity, cultural dimension is addressed as a societal, not an individual's characteristics, and refers to the distribution of values between the genders. A society is called feminine when there is not a strong differentiation between the genders for emotional and social roles. Both men and women should modest and caring, and both boys and girls may cry, but neither should fight. In masculine societies, both men and women are assertive and competitive. However, women are less so than men. For individuals from highly masculine cultural background, mothers may tend to feel more comfortable dealing with the emotional implications of diagnosis from a clinician, while fathers may feel more comfortable handling the factual aspect of the situation and show less emotion in response to a diagnosis. And for the gender differences within a country, we have May Valenzuela to present.
Good morning. The next topic is about the gender differences within one country. So we have two different kinds of gender differences. For the first one is the intracultural differences or the differences within one country. For example, a conversation between two American citizens who both grew up on the farms of Georgia would be intercultural because they will essentially have the same background and cultural orientations. The next one is the intercultural differences or the differences between countries. For example, a conversation between a man who grew up in Nepal and a woman who grew up in Micronesia would probably be an intercultural conversation because we could study how the different cultural backgrounds of the two people affect their communication strategies towards each other. There are definitely differences in gender roles within one country. In other words, American women will be less masculine than their male countrymen. The same will be true for the most feminine country in the world, Sweden. Also, there will be men be more masculine than the women. So, here's the word loud, which is a clear example that illustrates the use of words in social medias of English-speaking men and women. What you can clearly see is that English-speaking men use more forceful language than English-speaking women. However, when you compare English-speaking women with Swedish women, you will still see that there is a big significant differences, is between those two countries or groups when you look at the scores of these countries on this masculinity and femininity dimension. So, here's the examples of masculinity countries. Japan, which is the highest scoring country in the world. The next one is USA, the not surprisingly maybe. The third is the UK. The next is Italy, and the last one is Nigeria. And for the examples of feminine countries, the first one is the Netherlands, Nordic countries, Iceland, Chile, and Thailand. So for the last one is the individualism versus collectivism. The individualism versus collectivism dimension considers the degree to which societies are integrated into groups and their perceived obligations and dependence on groups. When we say individualism, it indicates that there is a greater importance placed on attaining personal goals. A person's self-image in this category is defined as I. On the other hand, collectivism indicates that there is a greater importance placed on the goals and well-being of the group. A person's self-image in this category is defined as we. Our society has a set of ideas about how we expect men and women to dress, behave, and present themselves.
And for gender roles and gender division of labor. Gender roles in society means how we're expected to act, speak, dress, group, and conduct ourselves based upon our assigned sex. For example, girls and women are generally expected to dress in typically feminine ways and be polite, accommodating, and nurturing, while men are generally expected to be strong, aggressive, and bold. The next is we have the traditional gender roles. Traditional gender roles are those behaviors seen from men and women in those old movies. While there are many differences today, these patterns of behavior have left an indelible impact on society and our thoughts about men and women. Here is a general recap of the typical views and expectations of men and women in the early mid-20th century. As mentioned earlier, men were considered responsible for taking care of the family financially. They took their jobs as sole providers very seriously. They also had the responsibility for guiding the family. While they may have listened to what their wives had to say, they made the final decisions. Men did not do the household duties or childcare. They felt the need to be strong and refrain from showing too much emotion or sharing too many personal feelings, especially with those outside of the family. Women were expected to be in charge of running the household. Mothers did the laundry, cooked the meals, and cleaned the rooms. They also took care of the children, giving them the care and attention that was required. While the wealthier families might hire a nanny, and childcare became more widely used in the later 20th century, but the women were often in charge of directing the nannies and dropping off or picking up from daycare. Women were seen as more emotional than men, more likely and more encouraged to open up about their feelings. And for how roles are learned, gender roles are passed on through generations. From the age of 3, children are able to start becoming aware of the differences between girls and boys based on the actions of the parents and the nature of the environment. As the children grow a few years, they start learning what behavior is appropriate and expected. The behavior is reinforced when the parents praise or reward their children for their actions. They can also be punished and challenged to change if it's considered inappropriate. Children are also encouraged to serve different roles in their interactions with the outside world. Boys are often encouraged to exert themselves in physical activities, and girls are typically given more attention to how they look and present themselves. And for the gender division of labor and gender analysis, we have Cris Borbon to present.
Hello guys, this is Chris and I'm going to report the gender division of labor and gender analysis. So gender division of labor, this refers to how work is organized in a community, how it is divided among women and men through gender socialization within the culture they live in. Understanding how labor is organized by gender in a given community provides us with an insight into how a community assigns tasks, responsibilities, and activities. In other words, it is organized in a sense that we're not creating walls between genders. What I mean is that we should give opportunities to both genders in order for us to establish unity. The next one is gender analysis. It is a systematic analytical process used to identify, understand, and describe gender differences and the relevance of gender roles and power dynamics in a specific context. So, in easier manner, it is considered as a systematic process for the reason that we should evaluate and characterize the gender itself before we construct a judgment. For example, it is hard for us to recognize a transgender woman as men if our only basis is the physical appearance. That is why we have to deal with the process to identify, understand, and describe the difference between gender. So the question is, why gender analysis is done? Number one is to better understand the opportunities or problems in the community and plan interventions which are beneficial to both women and men. So number one is for us to solve problems, especially in our community. We should eliminate the thought that only men or maybe women can only do a certain task. To make it successful, why not to respect everyone's opinion? And I think that is more logical. Then the next one is to expose the barriers to women's full participation in economic development. Traditional women are said to be inside the house, taking care of kids and doing house stuffs, only wishes the thought of feminism. Ladies, do you agree? In conventional perception, women can do a lot of things that men can also do. We have to pass through these hindrances for better opportunities. So, number three is to make decisions and implement a project or program that promotes gender equity. Number four is it helps to find the best strategies and solutions to address the different needs and dynamics for men and women living in poverty. Meaning, we're not going to stick onto the ideology that men are stronger than women. That's why they have to be superior. We should fix this mindset for us to attain the equity that we are lacking. That's all for today.
Thank you, everyone, and God bless.